LEGO Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight is simple by design, excellent in execution, and I have just a few problems with it. Hi, I'm Vadd. I'm here to tell you the combat is mechanically shallow. The stealth is easy to break, and you're going to be performing the same basic action over and over again. If you're familiar with the LEGO games, this has a very small roster of characters. You're going to absolutely reach a point as you journey through where there's just nothing left for you to do. Every time I started writing down my criticisms here, I came back to the same question. What is this game actually trying to be? The facts are, LEGO Batman isn't pretending to be some enormously deep action RPG. It's not here selling itself as a brutal combat game. It isn't trying to give you a character roster with hundreds of different builds. It's LEGO Batman. And judged on just those two words alone, this thing is remarkably good at what it does. I think the trick here is that while you're constantly repeating the same basic actions, this game is very good at giving you a different reason to perform those actions. You're going to be fighting, solving puzzles, chasing something somewhere across the broader city of Gotham, breaking into a place, building some ridiculous little LEGO contraption, swapping characters, traveling between main story missions. You might do a little side activities here and there. Individually, none of this is particularly complicated. Together, I think this creates a game that rarely feels as mechanically shallow as it actually is. For me, this leads to a much more interesting question. Instead of asking whether LEGO Batman is deep enough, for me the question slowly became, when faced with a game this polished, this focused, this fun, and this consistently entertaining, is it still exceptional when it also runs out of meaningful things to do surprisingly fast? And that's where this review starts to get complicated. Hi, I'm Vadd, and if you're new here, you might not know that I review games after completing them all the time on this channel. After I finished the main story here in Batman, as I was pushing my way through the side content, I was kind of surprised how little side content was left for me to do. As just naturally moving between main story missions, I was clearing one or two objectives each time as they were on the way. I think you can blast through the main story in well under 10 hours, maybe 6, maybe 8. At the same time, if you're playing co-op, smashing every brick, loving every cutscene, you might be here 12, 15, or 20 hours. I think there's actually a big main story here, and it's really going to come down to your speed and enjoyment. The time I spent running around Gotham, chasing collectibles, solving puzzles, finishing side activities, I think again adds another 10 to 20 hours here, where depending on your speed and your playstyle, you might just crush a zone surprisingly fast, but at the same time, I think a lot of players are just going to soak up the city and be kind of surprised how long they spent clearing a zone. I share this up front because later in this review, when I want to talk about value and replayability, this is going to matter a little bit more. The length of this game is going to vary. You know, if you've been around my reviews before, you know that the score that I give and the recommendation aren't the same thing. I'm grading the game on how well it executes what it's trying to do. I'm not here to punish LEGO Batman because it isn't mechanically complicated. But at the same time, that recommendation is kind of on the buyer's side of the equation. What are you getting? How long is it going to last? Is it worth what they're asking you to pay? You know, these are two very different questions. And if this review is useful so far, liking this video genuinely helps it find more people. If you want to support the work more directly, I have a single pay what you want tier of Patreon and YouTube channel members that help fuel future videos. Thank you. I got to tell you, the easiest description of Legacy of the Dark Knight here is probably also maybe the most accurate. What if the LEGO Batman game grew up playing the Arkham games? Because there's an influence from those games that is everywhere. There's this intimate close-range Batman combat that you find here with the counters, the dodges, the takedowns, the gadgets, the stealth encounters, the grappling, the gliding, the vehicles, the puzzles. There's just something to this one that if you've ever played the Arkham games of Batman, feels kind of familiar. They took a lot of that same vibe and brought it into the LEGO world, and it works quite well. Surprisingly well, as it's been wrapped in the structure and personality of LEGO game, which of course here means puzzles, characters with different tools, lots of environmental destruction, lots of buildings, collectibles, and a very, very forgiving difficulty curve. There's almost a pathological refusal to take Batman seriously for more than a few minutes of a time in a LEGO world, and I think this combination actually works. And maybe more importantly, I think it actually makes sense. There's a strong mechanical foundation in the Arkham games that, having carried over into the LEGO games, just gives a fun little punch. There's a playful way these characters are executed that they just don't normally get to be. I think the end result of all of this is that this is a game that a younger player can pick up and have a good time. And it's also something that an older Batman fan can pick up and also have a good time. You're not going to be completely bored. Both of you are going to have a good experience in this world. It's something that two very different people can sit down and play together without either side needing the game to transform itself into something completely different, because you can play this game solo or you can play it co-op at any time. And I think that is actually a difficult line to walk, to take two players of various ages and experience levels and put them side by side in the same world and have a good time. And for most of this game, I think Lego Batman here walks it extremely well. For me, I think when you look at a Lego Batman game from the outside, I think there's a danger of expecting too much from it. This game has its Arkham influences all over it. It's obvious. And the open world looks enormous. You know, Batman comes with gadgets. You know, there's going to be different playable characters. There's going to be skills to upgrades. And along the way, you're going to find combat arenas, stealth arenas, puzzles, races, crimes, side activity. And all of this can make this game look deeper than it actually is. I'm here to tell you it is not. The skill systems are very light. The combat systems are easy to understand, the playable characters don't fundamentally transform the game, and the stealth is not demanding. Most of the open world activities are built from a very small toolbox of challenges. At the same time, I don't think this game is lying to you, because all of these systems are doing exactly what they should be doing inside of a Lego game. And I think that distinction here matters. Simple isn't automatically shallow in a negative sense here, okay? You can make a game around 3 buttons, but if those 3 buttons keep producing interesting situations, you're going to be okay. And I think Lego Batman here understands that. You will be using the same basic ability 10, 50, 100, 300 times, but each time you're using it because there's a new Riddler puzzle you found on a rooftop. One side mission has an environmental challenge. A character can't interact with something, but Batman can. Or maybe the game has just turned the ability into one piece of a larger sequence. The actions will repeat, but the reasons, the environment, and the world around those actions will continue to change. I think that's how Lego Batman survives its own simplicity. It's not here asking you to master any complicated systems. Instead, it keeps remixing the exact system it taught you right at the start. Making my way through the main campaign, I had basically no issues with this formula, especially those opening hours, because those opening hours you're constantly being introduced to something new. Actually, each new mission chapter introduces a new character who has a new gadget, who is facing a new villain and a new part of Gotham, which unlocks new puzzles, new vehicles, new story beats. The game keeps a great pace all the way through the main campaign, and it moves quickly, which means there's very little time for any one idea by itself to overstay its welcome. If you're a real fan of the Batman, a real fanatic here, you're going to love the bouncing around of Batman history. You see Bruce Wayne, the League of Shadows, the Bat Family, Gotham's criminals. There's all kinds of different villains, characters that long-time Batman viewers are going to recognize immediately. And I think the interesting thing here is it doesn't feel like somebody just dumped a box of Batman references on the table. I think there's actually a thread they found to weave through a lot of these ideas and pull them all together. This game puts many different Batman movies and interpretations of this character. It's reshaped them in little pieces into one big story, and it's just a lot of fun. For me, my biggest struggle was that the game moved a little too quickly, especially as you got closer to the end. The main campaign pacing starts to feel rushed and your levels go by fast. I think that means that sometimes the major moments don't always have as much time to breathe as they should and deserve. And suddenly, as a player, you're just much closer to the finish line than you expected. Obviously, not every game needs to be exactly 40 hours long. There's not some magic metric of this is how long a game should be. And I would rather have a great 8-hour game than a mediocre 50-hour game. The disconnect here is that Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight has the structure and production value of something larger, and then it sprints to the finish line. The wider world of the open zone of Gotham is fantastic while you're still discovering things. For me, the problem there is what happens after you stop discovering them. We'll talk about that more a little bit later. I want to touch on combat really quickly, and in one sentence here it comes. It's easy, but it feels good. You're going to be repeating the same general combat flow constantly, bouncing around groups of enemies, counterattacking gadgets, dodging, building towards your takedowns, breaking objects, knocking people around. The game is going to keep throwing just enough variety into these fights that you're usually paying attention, just enough different enemy types that you might dodge instead of counter. Maybe this guy needs to be stunned, there's a larger enemy taking up some of your time, but none of this suddenly turns Lego Batman into some high-level character action game. It doesn't do that, and it doesn't need to. I think at its core, the combat here does one thing above all else: it fits Batman and it fits Legos. It immediately is readable enough that somebody who isn't particularly good at video games can understand what's happening. And I think that shouldn't be dismissed as making this game work, as I think accessibility is part of the core design here. There's a difference between a game being easy because no one bothered to develop the systems, and a game that is easy because the systems have been deliberately built around a broad audience. Lego Batman here is that second one. It's built around a broad audience. Where I do think that simplicity becomes a problem is when the game starts throwing longer combat encounters at you. There's a number of fight sequences that feel just a little too long, and you start to notice you're just mostly doing the same thing over and over again. This is also where having a smaller roster that is not too mechanically diverse here means that you can't just switch characters to make combat feel fresh again. It's one of these areas where having a more focused roster of playable characters is going to cut both ways. On one hand, I get why they did it. That smaller roster lets the game spend more time on the characters they feel like matters. It fits that more focused story. At the same time, that decision reduces the variety, because when combat gets repetitive, you don't have a massive collection of characters to shake things up. The system itself has to carry that monotony. And I think it's good enough to get you through the campaign, but I don't think it's good enough to make you want to do another playthrough. The stealth system is a little different from the combat system here. And I gotta tell you, in one sentence, stealth is easy. Stealth here is so very simple. I have a very difficult time getting too upset about that, as this is a Lego game. It is not supposed to be a punishing predator simulation where one mistake destroys the encounter. Kids need to be able to use these systems. Players who barely play action games need to be able to use these systems. I think this is completely reasonable to have a very simple, functional stealth system. You can grapple around, move between positions, pick off enemies, use your gadgets. You have ways to approach group combat encounters without just starting a big brawl. At the same time, I think stealth here undermines a little bit of the very small combat challenge that's presented here. If a player is moderately patient, you will be able to remove most, if not all, enemies before the combat encounter even begins. Again, I don't think this is a balance problem. Stealth is supposed to reward you for playing carefully. The problem here is that combat is already very forgiving. So if you're using one forgiving combat system and then stacking on top of that an even more forgiving stealth system, for younger players, this is probably ideal. For a more experienced player, it means you're going to have to accept very early on that Lego Batman here isn't interested in testing you. And again, I think for this title, that's okay. This obviously means that challenge isn't the pillar here of combat. Instead, variety is going to have to do that job instead. It's going to have to hold the systems up. And I think fortunately for the majority of the campaign, it will do that. I think probably the part here of Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight that I keep coming back to, how much repetition until it's a bad thing, because you're going to be repeating things constantly. You're going to destroy things, build things, fight people, use gadgets, collect things, and then just repeat versions of those things over and over and over and over again. And on paper, it's just not impressive. In practice, I think the context here changes constantly. And that's the important part here, because you're not just pressing the same single interact button 50 times every level. Instead, you're moving through different situations and settings, and these repeated mechanics are a reason to exist inside whatever you're currently doing. It's a huge part of why the Lego format works. It's understanding that variety doesn't require complete new mechanics. Sometimes you just need a new exciting problem to solve, and the Lego structure here does a great job with that. Routinely through levels, you're going to get doors that just don't open, and you're going to start smashing your way through the room. All of a sudden, you've built this absurd device, you found a hidden button, you found a little pipe you can crawl through, and you've just discovered some way to open this door. And oftentimes, it's a little humorous, and there's a joke inside, and it's just Lego. There's a playfulness that is constantly being presented here, and I don't think it felt like it was embarrassed ever. It just wanted to be silly. And I think Batman as a character is especially good for this silly treatment, because there's so many good source materials for just relentless jokes inside of a world that can oftentimes be relentlessly serious. Lego Batman can acknowledge that serious version of Batman while also at the same time presenting a very funny one that has no respect for anyone's dignity. I think the campaign in this game has a personality that goes beyond its simple mechanics. When I look at the progression systems here, the thought I keep having is they're fine, but they're not really the reason you're going to play this game. Yes, you have upgrades, you have unlockables, you have costumes, vehicles, cosmetics, just characters, collectibles. There's stuff here if you're a true completionist-minded player. You're going to be checking the map and going, hey, I've got one more thing. Great. Lego games have always been extremely effective at saying, hey, here's a satisfying map to clear, go for it. There's going to be percentages that climb, secrets to find, more cosmetics to unlock, and Lego Batman here does a great job of giving you things to go do even when the main campaign is over. What it does not have is a long-term end game. Once you've completed the campaign and cleaned up Gotham, you're done. There's no real variety here. You don't need to restart the story. You don't need to play it again. You've had the experience they're going to offer. I don't think there's a meaningful second playthrough structure in any of the current core game waiting for you. There's not a deep combat system begging you to replay the game at a higher level. There isn't some gigantic character sandbox where a second run suddenly feels completely different. Once you've completed the main campaign and any of the checklists you want to work your way through, this game has handed you everything. To be clear here, I think Legacy of the Dark Knight gives you a very enjoyable list of things to do, but I want you to understand it is a finite list, and you might be surprised, especially if you've played other Lego games that have come before this, how remarkably fast you can complete that checklist. Here, Lego Batman is excellent at keeping you entertained while there's another objective in front of you. It is not nearly as good at giving you a reason to return once those objectives are done. Over the years, Batman has been interpreted a number of different ways, and this game here combines those ideas in a way that somehow doesn't produce complete nonsense. Instead of just taking one Batman movie and rebuilding that inside of a Lego world, here in Legacy of the Dark Knight, it pulls from different versions of Batman and somehow kind of makes them coexist within the story. Yes, certain plot points have been changed, characters have been repositioned, moments have been recontextualized, but you're left with something that somehow feels familiar without just being another direct retelling of something you've already watched. And I think this is the right choice for this title. If you spent years and years watching Batman movies, playing Batman games, reading the stories, there's a certain pleasure here they present in recognizing where something came from, because this game isn't just chained to one version, it's here going to surprise you with different Batmans from history. At the same time, I think the Lego humor in the story gives the writers a lot of freedom here to just introduce an incredibly dark Batman material that really is existing inside of an incredibly family-friendly game. So instead of pretending these moments never happened, this game does a good job of taking a ridiculous Lego-friendly way to reinterpret them. I think that's exactly the sort of thing I expected and wanted going in, and it continued to deliver. It respected the ideas without becoming precious about the details. And visually, I think this is actually an extremely strong game. The city of Gotham looks good. The rain physics are almost unbelievable. There's a lot happening. The city here really does sell the Batman atmosphere, while at the same time it looks unmistakably like a Lego world. The environments here have a lot of detail, and there's a level of production value here that makes even simple activities feel more substantial than they otherwise would in a cheaper game. And this matters here because, again, the mechanics aren't really deep, which means the presentation has to carry them. And a simple puzzle is more enjoyable when the environment around it is interesting. A simple fight is more enjoyable when the animations sell every hit. When you're driving through Gotham, there's something enjoyable when Gotham is a place you actually want to look at. The presentation here isn't just decoration to keep you moving. Instead, it's a part of what keeps you inside the world and allows those simple systems to deliver. When I look back through my review notes and I go over my review scale and I go, it checks a lot of these boxes, it's a clean game, but if I had to reduce everything that Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight does well, I would put it like this. This game almost always understands when to change context. That's the secret here, because mechanically, this game is boring. You just have too few core interactions. The combat isn't deep enough to carry the entire game by itself. The puzzles aren't hard enough to carry it if it was a puzzle game. The stealth isn't developed enough to this be a true stealth game. The open world isn't really endless enough to be a true sandbox adventure, but Lego Batman doesn't ask any one of those pieces to carry the entire game, and it rotates between them flawlessly. Fight, explore, build, puzzle, drive, watch a fun little enjoyable story sequence, collect something, go somewhere else, fight again, explore, build, puzzle, drive, a story sequence that just plays in everything nicely, unlock a new character, new puzzles, new combat, new level, and everything just completely rolls forward. And before any one piece can completely wear itself out, this game puts another one in front of you. It is a good design, not a complicated design, but a good design decision. I think that's the reason I keep struggling to take points away from this game, because it's so shallow, because shallow systems can still be well-used systems. Here, the most serious weakness is obviously the repetition, and it doesn't really appear until you start looking at Lego Batman as a complete package rather than just the quality of an individual hour. An hour alone by itself is quite a fun time, but that repetition is glaring, and the campaign hides it so well, but the open world cleanup you might dive into after the campaign does not hide it so very well. Once you've completed enough side activities, Gotham starts to feel less like a city full of things to discover and more like a checklist you're finishing. And I think the structure behind everything starts to become blatant. You've seen this puzzle, you've done this fight, you've chased this category of collectible, you know what the game wants, and you're doing it now because there's still just an icon on your map. And that's where the simplicity really catches up here. I like the small roster of characters, but at the same time, I think that roster of characters means there's less room to create your own variety once the authored campaign variety starts running out. No, I don't think there needs to be a gigantic character list. I think the focus is refreshing, but when you combine this with the length, you have a little bit of a struggle here. I was kind of shocked at my completion percentage at the 12-hour mark. This campaign itself can really be moved through very, very quickly, and the final stretch of the campaign almost felt like the game was rushing me to get to the end. It's not a bad thing if you're really loving the experience. Especially if you're playing with a younger demographic, then that shorter length might actually be an advantage. But if you're here buying a full premium priced Lego game because you want something you can spend weeks slowly completing, Legacy of the Dark Knight here is much harder to recommend at launch pricing, because once you're done, there just isn't another layer. We need to talk about value for money, and this is where I think Lego Batman is going to take its largest hit. If you're new here, you might not know, this doesn't affect the end review score, but it's an important part of the review, because this is a full price game starting at $70 that has a $25 expansion on top of it. For me, this came out to be $95 US, which didn't include taxes, which after taxes for me bumped this up to a plus $100 game. This is a $100 US. And personally, I don't think it's worth $100. There's just too little game here for that. To be clear, quality matters more to me than raw hours to dollar hypothetical calculations. I don't think a game automatically becomes a good value because it takes longer to finish. But at the same time, I don't think an 8-hour game is automatically a bad value. Short games can be good values, long game can be good values, but quantity still matters when the price is this absurd. Here with Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight, this is a game where I can realistically see someone pick this up and finish it over a weekend. And if that's the player that absolutely loves Batman, that's probably fine. If you're buying this to play with a kid, a partner, a friend, a family member, I think that's probably fine too. There's a real value in having a polished, local, co-op multiplayer game here that people at different skill levels can play together. There's real value in that offering. But if you're looking at this as a solo purchase and you're sensitive to price, yes, spending $100 here will buy you a good game. It just doesn't buy you very much of one. I think Lego Batman here makes the most sense for people who already know exactly why this combination appeals for them. You like Batman and you like Lego games. Frankly, if that's you, you're probably not even watching this. This is probably everything you want it to be. Especially if you're looking for something to play with a younger player, I think this becomes an even easier decision to make. This game is very forgiving. At the same time, it's visually exciting, the objectives are easy to understand, and this tone is going to work across a wide age group. At the same time, the Batman structure here gives an older player just enough mechanical involvement that it doesn't feel like you're just supervising someone else's game. I think it's really a good fit for someone who wants a shorter Lego game. You can play through this, have a great time, finish all the most important stuff, and move on. You don't need to clear the open world. Not everybody wants a game that becomes their second job. There's something nice about a game that actually ends. Listen, if you need deep combat, you're not going to get that here. If you need difficult stealth, this isn't for you. And if a repetitive open world cleanup is going to drive you insane, don't clear the map. If you're here because you judge value primarily by how many hours a game can give you, I'd be very hesitant to pick this one up here. And if you're the type of player that's like, hey, I'm looking for replayability, this isn't offering that. Once you finish the story in exhausted Gotham, you can get all the achievements in one run. There's no variety to achievements, story, choices, world. It's over. it's final. And if you're a LEGO game enthusiast, you might find this smaller character roster disappointing. I didn't mind it. I think it benefits the campaign, but it also might hurt the longevity. And whether that's a good trade really depends on what you actually want from a LEGO game. For me, this brings me back to the problem I shared at the beginning. I keep wanting to take points away from LEGO Batman because it isn't very deep. But that's not the right criticism. It doesn't need to be deeper. It needs to make good use of the depth it has. I think for most of this game's runtime, it does that. The combat is simple, but it feels good. The stealth is easy, but it fits the audience. The puzzles repeat their basic logic, but the game keeps changing the context. Yes, the roster is small, but it perfectly supports a shorter, focused story. No, the campaign isn't doing something completely new with Batman, but it takes pieces we already know and recombines them into something that feels coherent and fun. This is an excellent presentation. The city is a great place to explore. Who doesn't love trolling around Gotham? And this game here really has an almost relentless ability to give you some new little thing to do before you've had enough of the last one. This game knows exactly how mechanically complicated it needs to be. At the time of review, LEGO Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight is awarded a 4 out of 5. I recommend. LEGO Batman here proves that simple mechanics aren't a problem when a game constantly gives them new context, but its short campaign, repetitive cleanup, and almost non-existent replayability keeps an otherwise excellent LEGO game from becoming an exceptional overall package.